2002 in Salt Lake City, the women's hockey tournament included 8 teams. And one of those teams was from the country of Kazakhstan. Now, unlike the other teams in the tournament, the team from Kazakhstan struggled. They barely had enough money to afford the uniforms for their games, and they arrived days before they left the Olympics. But they didn't have enough for warm-up uniforms for the team, and compared to the other teams, they looked really out of place. During the tournament, they lost all 5 games that they played. And in fact, they only scored 2 goals the entire Olympics. And they wanted, while they were there, to purchase souvenirs in town to take home with them, but they couldn't afford anything in Salt Lake City. In fact, the coach came to America with only $30 for his entire stay during the Olympics. They had a rough time. It was a difficult Olympic experience for them. Our reading today from 2 Timothy describes some difficult times that Paul and Timothy are going through. Paul is a prisoner in Rome. He's awaiting trial and probable execution. The world powers, political leaders, and the religious leaders have conspired together to put him in that position. His own people have turned him over to the Roman government, and the Romans want no God preached except the emperor. And Paul refuses to stop talking about Jesus. So things aren't going well for him. Timothy is facing his own challenges with the congregation. The people struggle with following false teachers. They listen to everybody who comes into town. Timothy isn't sure how to lead them. His uncertainty is leading his people to uncertainty. Timothy is having a difficult time. And finally, there are the disciples in our gospel reading today. Jesus starts talking to them about the need for forgiveness, and the disciples seem to despair. They recognize that they can't keep up with what Jesus is saying. Maybe the parables that Jesus has been telling them are starting to sink in, or maybe they just have this flash of inspiration and realize how much they fall short of what Jesus is asking them. Because they say, Lord, increase our faith. Jesus, help us follow you better, to do what you ask more completely. It's not really one of their best days as disciples. We know what that can be like, to have difficult days, to feel like things in our personal lives are falling apart, that we can't quite figure it out or get it all together, that the relationship we care about might be slipping away or so complex we don't know what to do with it, that the people we love are facing concerns and we can't help them or do anything about it, that those things we've always hoped and dreamed for in our lives just aren't coming together. Or we know what it can be like to feel like our lives in community with others are plagued by difficulty, that there's dissension or unrest among our colleagues at work, that we may not always agree with everything that's happening or everyone here in this community of faith where we feel like we should be able to do that, or we feel alone in our efforts to make changes or be heard among people that we thought understood us. Maybe we simply need to look at the world around us to recognize that we face challenges and difficulties. One of the other readings that was assigned for today that we didn't read here is from the book of Habakkuk. And he says this, he says, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help and you will not listen? Or cry to you violence? Why do you make me see wrongdoing and look at trouble? Destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention arise. So the law becomes slack and justice never prevails. The wicked surround the righteous. Therefore judgment comes forth perverted." Violence and trouble, strife and contention, injustice and destruction. Does that sound a little bit like our world? How? Our world is full of uncertainty, distrust, and fear. There are many ways that we might say we are having a rough time, that life is difficult or challenging or disappointing. But Paul looks at the world that he lives in, the persecution and the imprisonment, and he looks at the problems that Timothy faces with his congregation, with leadership and disinformation, and he writes to his young friends that God's Spirit living in us is not something that makes us timid. Other translations use the word cowardly, but we do not have a spirit of cowardice. But that because of Jesus Christ, the power of death has been broken in our lives, that we have been saved and we are called people of God. And we have been filled with the Holy Spirit, the presence of God in our very lives. And through that Holy Spirit, we have power and love and self-control. In our gospel reading, Jesus responds to the disciples' request for more faith by saying, it doesn't take great faith to follow Jesus. That faith the size of a mustard seed, a teeny tiny seed, is enough to produce great acts. And that doing those acts, they are acts that come from power and love and self-control given to us by the Holy Spirit. And those things are exactly what we should be doing. They are exactly what God expects of us. We, like the disciples, and like Timothy and Paul, are filled with God's Spirit, given as a gift. And with that, we can live without fear, without cowardice. Paul says we are not called to be timid when we face the violence of the world. We are not called to be timid when we see apathy or dissension among our coworkers or friends. We are not called to be timid when we face our own personal struggles. Instead, we are reminded today that the Holy Spirit fills each of us with God's love and presence. We are filled with power to act decisively with authority and assertiveness. We are filled with love to act with compassion, working for all those involved. We are filled with self-control to act within the confines of godly boundaries in all that we do. Remember that hockey team from Kazakhstan? How they were having that very hard Olympic Games? Their bus driver, who was driving them all around during the time of the Olympics, their bus driver noticed how much they wanted to purchase souvenirs and that they couldn't afford to. And so he mentioned that to one of the volunteers working at the arena. And the woman, whose name was Shannon, began to think about what she could do. And she discovered very quickly that to buy anything of substance for them herself, for 25 coaches and players, would be too expensive. And so she began to talk to her neighbors and to friends and to store owners, and people began to respond. Stores donated sweatshirts and polos and Olympic pins, and neighbors donated money, and the children of the neighborhood wrote cards to share their friendship. And they went and they looked up each player's name. They personalized every card and stuck a little cash in. And after the second game of the hockey tournament, which the team lost 0-7, that's not a good hockey score, which is also the way they lost the very first game, 0-7. They walked onto their bus to discover all these wonderful gifts, along with a note that Shannon had written them, which said, "We were impressed and inspired by the obstacles you overcame to come to the Olympics. We wanted you to have something to remember your time here from your American friends." bus driver acted with a spirit of love. He had compassion for this team that he had been shepherding through the Olympics. And Shannon, too, acted with the spirit of power and love and self-control. She was not overcome by the seeming impossible task. She was not fearful or cowardly or timid. Instead, she acted with power to organize an effort that stemmed from a love for strangers. And she did it in a way that made them feel welcome and cared for in the midst of a foreign country. The Holy Spirit was at work in Shannon and that bus driver and their whole community. That same Holy Spirit is at work in us, filling us not with a spirit of cowardice or fear, but filling us instead with a spirit of power and love and self-control, so that we can face our difficult days and the difficult days of others, knowing that God is working in us